with us today to explore everything that has happened with the residency. I'm very excited. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephanie Swilley, and I am the founder of Creative Nexus. And we're here today for our opening reception and artist talk for Intersections 2. Yes, I did put a lot of creativity into naming the exhibition since I just reused last one, but I really loved the idea of continuation from the last residency, and since some of us are repeats, really continuing to stretch those muscles. For anyone who isn't aware, Creative Nexus is a community that's actually built for creatives. The idea behind it is that coming together with this sense of community rather than competition or, capitalism will foster more creativity in our practice and allow us to support each other better and help us to make art for the sake of art rather than art for the sake of merchandising or commodification, anything like that. So Intersections 2 shares work from our second virtual residency, and this took place roughly in the February-March timeframe. I know some went a little longer, some took a little longer to get started. We're very flexible here, but in the Creative Nexus residencies, the focus is entirely on the process. It's about exploration and the journey, and there's no final product required. So the hope is that this freedom will allow artists to feel a little safer exploring without having set expectations. Because sometimes you have an idea, you want to explore it, and it turns out it was not right for you, and you have nothing at the end of it other than I learned I don't like that. But that is a completely valid part of the creative process, so we want to make space for that. This residency was also our first one where we crowdfunded stipends from the community through donations for our artists, which was really exciting to be able to offer that and allow our community to show support for the arts, for individual artists. And in the words of one of my friends, kind of pretending to be like an old school Renaissance patron of the arts, where you just are supporting it, but you don't feel like you have to get something tangible back out of it, which is beautiful. This residency, we had 4 pairs, and each pair had free rein on what they wanted to explore together and how they wanted to do it. It was whatever worked for them. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So if any questions come up, you can definitely pop them in the chat when you think of them so you don't forget, because I would forget. And this goes for our artists as well. If you have questions for each other, definitely feel free to share. So I am really excited to hear about everyone's experience. And since nobody ever wants to go first and it's all kind of on me, I'll just go ahead and dive in and kind of set the tone for you. So again, hi, my name is Stephanie. I did this residency with poetry. I do I do visual art and writing, but decided to kind of do some poetry for this one. We did this a little differently this year, where we did ranked choice to assign our pairs. So each artist put together a portfolio, a profile that had like their bio, some of their work, what kinds of things they're interested in, if anything was actively bouncing around in their brain that they wanted to explore. And we each got to go through and explore everybody's bio and then rank our choices of who we were most interested in working with. And we kind of paired from that, which was really wonderful. So in looking at the profiles, I saw in Trey's profile, he mentioned, he is a composer and who I ended up working with, but he mentioned an interest in finding a way to do composition alongside slam poetry. And I found that very interesting, mainly because I have very minimal experience with slam poetry, to the point where like I had an understanding of what it was, roughly. And that was about where it ended. And I was like, that sounds great. I don't know anything. I love diving in headfirst into things where I know nothing. So that's what I did. And poor Trey got stuck with me. But it was really wonderful. We worked together and kind of talked through some different, we looked at the different prompts that were available, because I didn't have any firm goals and Trey didn't really have anything other than like, I'd like to write some music. So we just kind of went through the prompts and saw what stood out to us. So some of the areas were the idea of like absence and silence and space, and then another with like unseen details, and then another one with echoes. We had another one too, but that it got way too ambitious, so we pared it down. So by the end of it, for me, what we decided was I wrote 3 poems around those different themes. And the idea is that it will come together, and Trey is writing music that will use this spoken word poetry in it. And so looking at like 3 movements to explore it. So for a little to tell you about how it went for me, I knew I didn't know what I was doing, and I spent a lot of time watching other slam poetry like videos and stuff. And to start with, you know, when you just Google slam poetry videos and you're going through YouTube, you're not finding like people who are new at it. You're finding the people who are like winning the competitions, and they are amazing, and they're leaving you like raw and in tears and with so much emotion. And they're kids, folks. They're like 16 years old and you're like, these people are amazing. And so you sit down and you're like, surely I can do this. I've got, you know, I've got all this life experience. It's not that easy. It's really hard. So what I ended up doing, because this is totally different than how I write normally. I don't do spoken word anything, let alone slam poetry. I the feel in my poetry is usually a little softer, I think, is probably the word I would use. Like sometimes it gets angry, but in general, like it's not very in your face. And I want it to be very retrospective, but that's not slam poetry. So I gave myself kind of the opportunity to explore these ideas and this type of writing that's very different for me, really kind of pushing myself into a state of, you know, that safe discomfort. Um, so it started off with, and I'll say like the first poem I did, the first version was very me, even though I was trying not to be me. And then I went back and I kept like pushing it and editing it to try to make it more slammy, because that is the word that I have come up with. But it never quite like got there. And then the next one I think is a little bit closer. And then the last one, I finally like I got mad, and I got really angry. And I kind of think that that is important in slam poetry. Like it, in all the ones I listened to that were like really moving for me, they were angry. They were pointing out, you know, disparities, oppression, all sorts of the horrible things that are going on, and they were mad about it. So that was really nice. It was very nice to have an opportunity to be really pissed off and be like, I'm doing it for my art though, so you don't get to be mad at me. And it was really rewarding to see like the progression of like, okay, this one is really not there, but little by little starting to find it, starting to find that voice and the style and the rhythm, and being able to embrace that and kind of switch, like, okay, I'm not writing like Stephanie right now. I'm doing this. I'm not saying I would probably do this again, because it occurred to me a few weeks into the residency that slam poetry is supposed to be performed. And I forgot about that at the beginning. And I have no interest in performing. I don't want to do that. That sounds real scary. So I think what we'll do is I'll do the performance with Trey's piece, because it's, I can hide off to the side behind a music stand and no one will see me, and it'll be fine, because you're also supposed to memorize it, and I don't memorize things. But all that to say, it was a very, very rewarding experience, especially to, the current political climate gives you a lot to work with in the realm of I'm angry and there's injustice and things are bad. But I also wanted to make sure that it was not so on the nose, like not so obvious. I wanted to bring something to it, because if you're familiar with my writing or my thought processes at all, like what I generally like to do is end on a point of hope and end on a point, like, this is bad, but it doesn't have to be this way. Like, here are the steps we can take forward. So like two of them still do that. The last one, I was just angry and I was just yelling at everybody. Just point it out. But I do think that there were still like, my goal with that, I'm sorry, I'm totally rambling, but my goal with that was to have it be, instead of just I'm angry, but here are facts. Like, I'm going to back up my claim, and I want to lay this out and paint a picture that you can't help but go, oh yeah, she might have a point. Maybe we should do some reading. So it was very fun. Trey was an amazing partner, because at no point did I, don't make that face, I saw that. But at no point did I feel like somebody was going to be judging me going, what is she doing? It was, very, very welcoming, very comfortable. And it was, again, that safe kind of discomfort where, like, I'm going to do the scary thing, but it's okay if I fail. It'll be fine. So it was really exciting. And we did weekly meetings together where we talked about kind of where things would go when we, especially when I was like, I don't know where to go with this. I don't know how to get started. We would brainstorm together, come up with different topics and ideas, and bounce things off of each other. And it was really wonderful. So I am not going to be performing these for you, because that's terrifying, but I did hole myself up in my studio yesterday and record them, so you will be able to hear me non-live performing them in the exhibition. But that is enough of me talking. So I'm going to pass it to Trey now, so he can tell you how wonderful it was to work with me.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me all right. Hello. I'm happy to be here. My name is Trey. Like Stephanie said, I am a composer, and this was my first ever experience working in a residency, as well as this kind of collaboration and this kind of art. And so it was very exciting just to see what I could come up with, what I could try and do, how to combine our different art styles, and to see what happened. And so I'll give a little bit of backstory as to why I liked this spoken word, this slam poetry idea. For me, this was also an entirely new way to write and new way to think about it. So I have a close friend of mine who I've worked with for a couple of years now, and he is one of those 19-year-old just phenoms at slam poetry that is winning national competitions and is really awesome. And it's been really fun to watch him perform around the Waterloo area as well as just like across the country on videos and stuff. And it really inspired me. And so I was talking with him one day after a presentation that he gave, and I kind of brought up this idea of, hey, would you ever like to have some music with that? Because I saw a performance that there was live music. However, they were strictly improvised material. There was nothing written, and they would try and go with the words that he was saying, with the themes of the pieces, but it was still improvised. You know, you knew that there was some variety in what was going to happen. And I had the idea, maybe it would be kind of cool to place, you know, a spoken word piece with composition, but like written out completely line by line, to see how you could make a story alongside the background. You know, to really give the audience a sense of maybe what is happening in the piece, but also maybe a sense of what's not happening in the piece, just to provide some contrast. And so that was where this idea really came from. I knew that I wanted to work with it, since I knew that him and I we might collaborate in the future, and I thought I should give myself an opportunity to try. And so that's why I gave that prompt out. I was really happy to see Stephanie pick it up and decide to work with me. That was a lot of fun. And like she was saying, we had three different poems that were written, and from the musical side of things, she wrote some very good poems. I think they were really they lended themselves well to musical material, which kind of made my job a little bit easier. So it was very fun. I had never worked in that fashion, like I said, where I had the words pulled up on the one screen and my music on the other screen, and just seeing like how can I make this come to life? You know, did I want to perfectly encapture what I thought these words meant, or did I just want to give a frame to allow the speaker to kind of have their own moment in the spotlight, so to speak? And so that was really a great time, just changing how I was thinking about my own writing. No longer was it my own self-driven story that I was trying to create, but I was trying to more so kind of evolve somebody else's story. And that was really meaningful and impactful for me in my writing. And so we did end up getting three different movements. I think if we got it all figured out, maybe we can play the second movement today once we get there. I made the video today. I hope it works. But the three different movements I can talk about real fast. Obviously, they go with each of the poems that were made, but I thought it would be cool to have the spoken word be kind of in a different capacity for each of the movements. So there's some variety in what people would hear, or kind of the feelings, the vibes, I guess, as you went through the piece. And so the first movement combines some spoken word and music at the same time. But that was where I was going to dive into some kind of sound painting esque, uh, which, if you don't know what sound painting is, it's a live music painting, music sign language is kind of the typical way we describe it. It's not a finished product yet. I should say that, I guess, before I dive in. It's not quite done with the piece. That's why I only show the second movement today. But I do have a structure for what I hope it will be when it comes time to perform. So I'll just kind of go through what I know so far. But yeah, so the first movement will be some sound painting, some improvised material, kind of calling back on what I know slam poetry and live music to be, of a lot of improvised material. Some things people might come back to as performers because they know that those ideas work well together. But that was the idea there. So kind of both. The second movement that I'll play today, it will be purely the spoken word and the composition all written out to be performed live. And so in tangent with each other. And so I did this a couple of different ways. In the spoken word part, which you might see in the video, there are some times that I wrote certain words to have emphasis on certain measures with certain things happening. That was typically indicated by just like an asterisk and kind of some spaces between the words. Other times there might be just an entire kind of a whole paragraph above the staff line for them to read. And I was just kind of assuming the pace that Stephanie or any performer might read it at, and just trying to do things that could work together with it. Obviously, these things weren't strictly like they needed to happen at certain times. I was just allowing some variance in the performance from one day to the next to be in the piece. And then there were some moments that are just music related. You know, that I felt like the poetry came to a nice conclusion. It was a nice end of a stanza or something like this, and the music needed a moment to breathe for itself. Because otherwise, if I just played my really loud and flashy stuff over top of the voice, then that's kind of defeating the entire purpose. And so that was my idea with the second movement that we'll listen to, I hope. And then the third movement, the final movement is, like Stephanie said, the very intense one, the angry one. And I decided I did not want to mess with that, where I said, I'll let her do the entire poem before the movement is played. That'll be kind of a separate thing. You can hear that, think about it, reminisce, and then I will play the music afterwards that I felt like related to it, that could respond to it. That one isn't done yet either. It doesn't sound nearly mad enough to coincide with what she has written. But that was kind of my idea, to incorporate music and spoken word, to hopefully put this on a stage someday so people can hear these really, really nice poems that Stephanie wrote. And I think that was mostly my musical perspective and how I went about composing this kind of piece. I would echo what Stephanie said. It was really, really fun to work with her. I had a great experience in this residency, mostly because it's funny that she says that she felt like it was a no judgment zone. Because if anybody were to be judged, I feel like I was the one bringing all these complications and these issues into the whole project sometimes, where I was so uncertain about many different details. And as I'm sure she could tell you, I kind of maybe I was being too particular or a bit of a perfectionist in some of these areas. And so it was really fun just to have her kind of always in my corner to back me up and say, this is really great. This is exciting. Let's just keep on going and see what we can come up with, rather than worrying so much about the finished product, at the brainstorming stage or wherever we were at. So I think that's all that I would really have to say about it. If we could play it and listen to the second movement, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Do you want to share that?
I certainly can. Yeah. Let me just pull it up. So I was not very, let's see, used to making like videos, I guess. So I use Canva today to make one. And so I just have the media player. I hope that that will share correctly. Let me give it a shot. Okay. Is this something that people can see?
Yes.
And is it something that people could hear? I don't think it played any sound. Otherwise, Stephanie, I may ask you to do it because maybe it will just work when you do it and not me. I don't think there was that much of a silence. Okay, to save our time, Stephanie, would you like to give it a shot?
Yes, I can give it a shot.
Okay, my apologies.
Hold on. I will find it. I was not prepared. Um, Here we go. Okay. Let me figure out how to share things now.
I guess
And
while she pulls it up, the only thing I would maybe say is while you were listening, it could be fun to maybe look at the words that are written and see if they fit the vibe, or can fit the sound in your ears. Or you could even close your eyes and just imagine, what do you think the poem might be talking about. Um, ooh.
is it showing you the wrong page?
I see an agenda.
Ah, man, it is showing you the wrong page. Hold on. Stop. Let's try this again. Close. I'm very prepared. This is what I want to share. There we go. Okay. And can you hear?
I don't know. It seems like I'm not sure if the sound. I don't know why it wouldn't work, but Zoom is unable to
You
play
don't.
it or something. No, we can't hear it, unfortunately.
Daniel, if you said something, it sounded like you said something. You're on mute.
Did you share your sound when you hit share screen?
Oh,
When you share screen, there will be a couple of checkboxes to share sound.
share sound. I see it.
I will say, when I hit that button, I don't know why it still didn't share the sound. I couldn't hear anything though. So if you could hear it, maybe it would be okay.
You might also have to change your audio driver.
Oh, yay.
Okay, well, I'll start it at the beginning then. Here we go.
And that was the whole movement, or what I have of it right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Do you have anything else you wanted to say? No, you went on mute. Okay.
I don't have anything else to say. I appreciate your time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I am going to endeavor to share a screen again because we're going to move to John and Devin next. And Devin sent me a video that I lost when I shared that. So she could not be here with us today. She is solo parenting and has other family things going on. So she pre-recorded for us a little talk about her experience. And I will pull this up and share, and I will click to share the sound again. So she is here. Screen sharing is paused. Oh, Lord. Hold on. This one. Does screen sharing cause anyone else like an obscene amount of dread? Just me? Just me. Okay. So you should see it now. A big picture of her face. Okay. And I will hit play.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to my portion of the artist talk. My name is Devin Bennett. I am Pencils and Parsley, and I worked with John. He was a composer, and I did 2 pieces of visual art, and then he wrote music that goes along with them. So, sorry I can't be here in person, but Sundays are hard for me with some family commitments. So I am here. I am still here early. But I want to walk through a little bit of my process with the 2 pieces that I did. And if you have questions, maybe Stephanie can get you in touch with me and you can ask and we can publicize the answers or something like that. We'll figure it out. But I am a mixed media artist. I focus on color pencil, ink, and watercolor pencil. I did do some things with watercolor, regular watercolor paints in these 2 pieces. So that was definitely a step outside my comfort zone. So I think that we should get started. Let me show you what I made. Okay, so these are the 2 pieces that I created in the residency. The hippo with the bird and the seagull with the water and the pier and the little shadow. So I'll talk about the hippo first. So my thought with this piece, first of all, I feel like animals and hippos are really approachable subjects for me, in large part because of the curves, the shapes. So I have the shapes here on the face and the eyes, the curves along the back. I love to contrast kind of hard and soft or sharp and smooth in my work, and so I really enjoyed contrasting the curves and the like chonkiness of the hippo with the sort of angled sharpness of the grasses here, and even the bird's a lot less curved and much sharper. And then also the contrast of large and small. The hippo is so big and the cute little bird is so small. Plus, you know, these little birds do hang out on the hippos in nature, and I think that's fun too. So I did the piece in ink first, in ink outline, and then looking at it, I hadn't really intended on doing regular watercolor because, like I said, it's not particularly comfortable of a medium for me. But I looked at the piece and I said, okay, this water, it just needs to be watercolor, because I wanted some of these pieces like in here where it's more saturated and darker, and then having some of the white space even around the grasses for that contrast. It looks very much like pond water. You know, it's kind of stagnant with the reeds and everything. So I mixed up blue and green, and I got it kind of heavy in some places, which sort of terrified me when I did that. But I think it works out. I think it looks really nice. I'm happy with the edges of the piece here and how they're sort of washed out. I think it frames the bottom of the piece really well. And also it contrasts with some of the sharpness of the grasses here with the feathering out of the water down below. So after that, I moved on to the watercolor pencil part. So the grass and the bird's beak and the hippo base layer are all watercolor pencil. And so I laid that down, and then I went on with the colored pencil and I did all of the details and really made sure that I blended everything and added lots of pink, because the hippos have all these pink splotches on them and they're really cool. And yeah, so I layered the whole thing up, and I noticed that in the music complement, John did a lot of layers and contrast as well. And so I think that in watching our finished piece on YouTube, you could really tell how the layers work together in the whole piece. So moving on to the other piece that I created in the residency is the seagull. I forget what I named it, but I think something about the seagull flies on the wings of music or something like that. I didn't have a very good title for the hippo. I couldn't come up with anything particularly good, but the seagull one turned out really good. So this, I wanted to play with perspective, which is something I find myself doing a lot in these sorts of residency experiences, that changing of perspectives and doing a lot of contrast. I find that really draws me in. And so in this one, I wanted to play with perspective in size. And so you have the seagull flying over top of the water and towards this pier over here. And I have this mental image that off to the side, somewhere over here, there's probably like a little kid with a bunch of French fries, and the seagull's like, I want to steal that. So that's sort of the story that I'm imagining as I was drawing this. The seagull's going to come in and land. But I really enjoyed playing with the shadows in this, which I found really challenging, actually, to create the shadows under the pier here and the shadow under the seagull. I didn't intend on putting those in, but then once I started to color the seagull and choose the colors for the pier, I realized that it was looking a little flat. And I think the reason for that was the lack of the depth of the shadow. And so I was really careful to add in the shadows for both of these in the same orientation, so that it looks like the light is coming from the right spot. So the tops of the wings and the top of the back on the seagull is a slightly brighter shade of white, so you have the highlights here and you have the shadow of the bird down here on the water. And I really enjoyed the freedom of the shadow not being perfect. It's actually slightly distorted, which is perfect because it's on the waves. The waves are moving, and so the shadow is sort of twisted and interesting too. So that was really fun. And once I added the shadow in, the whole thing just popped, and that seems like the bird's coming up off the page, and I really love that. So this one also is a watercolor base for the water itself, just like the hippo one. In contrast to the hippo piece here, where I left the watercolor without any colored pencil over the top. On the seagull piece, I did do a lot, actually, of colored pencil over the top. You can see some of the edges of the watercolor, which again frames the whole image, which I really enjoy. And then I did whites and blues and some dark blues, and I just sort of sketched it in a way, sketched on the waves and the highlights and the shadows, and without really knowing what I was doing, which I guess is making art, right? And I think it came out really nice. I think there's a lot of movement. I really love the way I did some of these little choppy shadows, which was a happy accident as well. I think one of the wonderful things about the residency is that it encourages play without judgment. And I really tried to lean into that by allowing myself to play with these little dashes here, which I think also helped to frame the piece, because I was starting to fill the entire page with layers of aquas and blues, and I'm like, I think this is getting too heavy. So that's when I started to play. I went back, I left this part for a little while when I was doing the water. I went back to the pier and added the little choppy highlights and shadows, and it brought so much to the piece that I incorporated it throughout the rest of the water, especially over here where the focus is less, I think, on this side of the piece than it is over here. So I like that change in focus as well. So the pier is watercolor pencil and colored pencil. The water itself is watercolor paint and colored pencil, and the bird is just colored pencil. I think the beak is watercolor pencil, but everything else is just colored pencil. And I love this gray paper, again, thinking of contrasts, because it contrasts a true neutral with the gray, with this really bright white. And the white on the bird just really stands out. I think it looks even more like the bird is flying up with the sun. And I really love that all together. So those are my two pieces from the residency, and I really love how they both came out. I think even though the subject matters are pretty different, that they go together so well, because I think a lot of the techniques that I used and thoughtfulness of comparing and contrasting light and heavy, smooth and sharp lines and all that, I think they pair really well together. And so I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased with how they came out. And as always, thank you, Stephanie, for hosting such a wonderful residency. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Even though I couldn't be here today on Sunday, I'm still around. Definitely let me know what you think. Ask me any questions. I'm Pencils and Parsley on Instagram, or you can email me. I'm sure Stephanie will share contact information and all that. But I'd love to hear from you. Bye. Thank you.
Hey. Okay, so that was Devin. Such a bummer she couldn't be here, live, but I'm so glad she could record that for us. And we will pass off now to John to tell us how much he loved it too.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting project for me because I guess I'm more accustomed to working with text, and I have written pieces that were inspired by visual art and paintings, but this was much different because sometimes I would say, well, there's a piece by Nolda or someone like that, and that's a kind of a one-way street. I'm reacting to what he painted 100 years ago, or maybe not quite 100 years ago, but a long time ago. But now it's more of a collaboration, so it was an interesting twist on it. And so we talked about what we might want, where we might find some common ground to work on something together. And I like the idea of her. She has some videos where she shows the process, and it's sped up. So you see this. It's kind of like you see the process taking place, but it's much at a much more rapid pace. And so I liked that idea a lot. And so we were going to work with the hippo piece, and then the seagull piece came a little bit later. So we started with the hippo piece, and when she started to talk about the duration that she was thinking of, she's thinking of maybe a 30-minute piece. So I immediately, pulled my hair out and ran shrieking from the room because I was thinking about, well, it's 30 minutes. Well, anyway, so I had to kind of rethink how I wanted to approach it. And so what I ended up doing, I knew that I wanted something that was kind of improvisatory and kind of free form. And it started out with a kind of a rhythm track. It's all electronic. I'm sorry about the dogs. They're having a jamboree of some sort today. It sounds like so. But the so everything was electronic, and I thought that would be the easiest way to go because just for a number of reasons, time and budget and things like that. So, and I knew that it would be more malleable. It's easier to change things, if it's all kind of electronic. So that's how that's how I proceeded. So I started out with just a long kind of a drum loop almost. It was kind of world percussion sampled instruments. So there's some tabla and some different instruments, and it never gets to be very busy or very it's not too condensed. It's very airy for the most part, and events sort of drop in and out. And I use the word in my description as sprawling. That's probably the best way to describe it. And then there are other instruments that sort of come in and out. And I felt like that was an okay. It seemed to work with the pace of the video. For the seagulls, I kind of think I thought I really don't want to redo the same thing. I don't want to just write that same piece again or use that approach. So I thought, for some reason, the seagull piece to me, it suggested maybe more of a conventional kind of classical. In my case, for this, it was more of a neoclassical kind of sound. And so I wrote a piece of music that was about 6 or 7 minutes, and then we just kind of altered the orchestration, the electronic orchestration, and just repeated it. And so, because it was another 30, 35 plus minute work as well. And I thought to myself, well, if somebody can tell that it's being repeated, good on them, so I didn't really worry about that too much. But it was a very interesting project, and I enjoyed doing it, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. And yeah, it was. I will say that we quickly agreed that we wanted to have something that was done and tangible in some sort of state at the end of it. We felt like that would kind of help us. But I think we're both kind of like deadline oriented, and felt like that would help us kind of get going, and it did. And so that was how we approached it.
Okay,
End of
beautiful.
story.
Thank
So,
you. That was wonderful. Yeah. I cannot wait to listen. They are long. So do make sure you take the time though, to experience it. It's really great.
I would also say that you can actually um, it's not really linear in either aspect, either the audio or the visual. I think you can just kind of skip through, and if you see something that looks cool, you can spend a little more time. Otherwise, I think you can kind of, it's not like your symphony that's, damn it, you can't rush the transition. No, I think this is fine if you just want to just drop around, drop through, see what you hear.
Drop in, drop out.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, thank you so much. That was wonderful to hear about. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I love anybody who is, pushing boundaries. That makes me happy. And we will move on to Daniel now. Rena is not with us today. She wasn't sure if she was going to be able to join, but we'll let Daniel tell you all about how wonderful she was to work with and sing her praises so that she can be very happy when she watches the replay. Your turn.
An introduction. So, hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a composer. I worked with Rena Joy, a poet, and I think I'd like to start with just the comment that you made, John, about working about things being a one-way street. I've worked with text before. I've had pieces that were based off of text or based off of paintings or other arts, but rarely has it been with a living, breathing person especially, and never has it been with a living, breathing person that knew that I was that I was taking inspiration from their art. So this was a different thing. So Rena and I interacted. I think there was, I know I had a little stress with, okay, well, I don't, because when I'm thinking about how I would set a text, I'm thinking they're dead, and I can manipulate text. It's like, let me stretch this out a little bit here. I may, pull in, look at that person's other output and grab, okay, here are a couple of turns of phrases. I need some extra time, or I want to have a tangent or something. I have a lot of control. It's really it's my piece, and I'm just taking inspiration from theirs. But the idea of having a living collaboration, I think was a little bit stressful, but also interesting. It's a fun. So it required communication. So that being said, how do we get started? We did not know what we wanted to do. We started with some of the prompts. We talked about them a little bit, and then went our separate ways. And sort of thought about those, and the idea was to come back together with some initial materials, and we did that, and it was a bust. The things that the initial prompts did not take us anywhere, and yeah. So we separated again, and with kind of departing with, having talked about what worked, what didn't, and Rena came back with the poem that we ultimately ended up going with, Phoenix's Guide to Self-Love. This was I feel like our collaboration was a lot of, oh, here, let's get together, and then we separate for a while and think on it, and sort of spin our wheels, and then come back, and they did not have to be, they were not as frequent as some collaborations that I've done in the past. And I don't think it was needed, because honestly, I kind of couldn't do things until I had words to do things with, if that makes sense. I think when you're setting text, the text is what matters. And in a way, that makes things easy, because you have the text to go with, to basically, as long as you don't do anything too silly, then it should be fine. Just, treat the text like it's important, because it is. But all that being said, the poem, and I can go ahead and show it to you while I'm talking, so that you can read it. If I say share, and I say share sound, because I'll eventually make some noise for you, and if I say share that, you should see, here is, and I'll make it smaller so you can see the whole thing. There it goes. So this is a number of things. The original poem, and is this. So these non-indented lines is the poem. And in our initial conversations, I think Rena had she'd never collaborated with a composer before, and I believe she said something along the lines of being, I tried explaining. It's like, well, I can I can treat it like a song. If you wanted to think about you're doing lyrics for a song or some such, or even if it's sung or if it's spoken, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't, the text doesn't have to be a long text. When we were originally talking about examples, I threw out the idea of having a piece be for a speaking performer. One of my colleagues at the university, Andrea Johnson, has asked me in recent, not as she asked me a shameful time ago about doing a piece for speaking pianist, and I said, "Yeah, that sounds great." And then we sort of both got busy. But I thought, "Ooh, this could be a nice opportunity where those stars align, and this could be a piece for her." So I threw this out to Rena, and I gave her a lot of YouTube links of pieces that were for pianist playing while speaking, or piano with narrator. And with all of those examples, there was a bit of, the narration was almost always a story, like it was a short story or a children's story. Like it was really a narration, and not so much poetry, like presented more tersely, and then, sort of woven with the text. So there was some I guess stress a little bit at the beginning about the girth of the words needed, but we struck on doing having text that would be spoken and then sort of reactionary musical interludes in between. That was what I presented as kind of an idea that we could chase. And once kind of along on the process of the piece, I thought it might be cool to set up something that, set up a couple different, to parrot Trey's turn of phrase, a couple different modes of delivery. So these are Rena's original text are words that would be presented when the piano is not playing. The pianist, maybe something is resonating, like they're using the sound good pedal, and the piano is ringing out over. And once the sound dies down a little bit, the pianist can turn to the audience and say, "Hey, here's this thing. Where'd my mouse go? Phoenix." And then the next time is going through the text. And I wanted to set up a situation where, because the idea is, the Phoenix is sort of coming to grips, self-discovery, love, self-acceptance. They're working through some inner things. I wanted to set up the idea of, have some text that is happening while the pianist is playing, and have them not direct the text outward toward the audience, but have them really have it be kind of an inward directed thing. So while they're playing, be speaking some of this text. So I came up with the idea of, having some questions that, or some text that would be presented, that we called them word salads, that would be presented while the pianist is playing. And I came up with some to start, and then you'll see in the score, I don't have these put in yet because these were a recent addition. These are some kind of inspired by some of my questions, but also putting in some her own thoughts. Rena gave us some word salad material as well. And the idea is the material in between each of these materials in the original poem would be sort of reactionary. It sets us up for the next thing, or sometimes it's really kind of a commentary on the previous thing, if that makes sense. Some nods. It made sense. All right. So this is the idea of the piece is, so there are, sort of exposed text, and then and then other moments where it's text and music are happening at the same time. For my part, I approached this really trying to aim at, it was all about keeping things in the sky. I spent a while working on a Phoenix theme that seemed, had the feel of being aloft, and a lot of upwards motion. This is text painting 101, and just all of this business. I'm using a lot of the upper end of the keyboard, and the moments when there are lower notes are, well, pretty few and far between. So I can play a little bit. It's 8.5 minutes long. We did finish. I think at this point I need to put in this text as kind of an option. The idea is that the text in the word salad sections is, we will give these two options that the performer could speak, or if they wanted to, they could come up with their own sort of word salad reactionary thing, so that the performer could have kind of an additional layer of ownership. So, um, so yeah, I will move this aside. So here's a bit of the score. And I can make that big. So here's this initial bit is the Phoenix theme. And this should play. Actually, let me Zoom audio. All right, so it should play. Awesome. So this is the Phoenix theme, and this idea of very sort of in octaves, high in the keyboard with pedal. There's a lot of pedal throughout the theme every time it's presented. This idea of the ringing, very much thinking about the mythology of a phoenix and the imagery, kind of thinking about, okay, life continues, this continuation of the thread and all this. So those were things that I had in mind. Here's the first of those word salady moments. And each kind of is, setting the tone for the material around it. The next time the Phoenix theme shows up is, about halfway through. A little bit of confidence has been built, and it's transformed a little bit. So this would be some of that, gaining confidence, getting up higher altitude kind of imagery that I was thinking of. Kind of blending the Phoenix theme and some of that sort of aloft material. And throughout, there's kind of a trajectory of, at the beginning, I think the Phoenix theme sounds more sad, and progressively it sort of brightens. Um, I would, I kind of want to play from, this is the last, actually one of the next to last stanzas. I kind of want to play from here to the end. Shouldn't be, let me see. Should be 3 minutes. Do I have time for 3 minutes? You're making a face. Okay. So this will be kind of the brightest and kind of lead you on the way out. This is the brightest things are. There's a level of self-acceptance at this point, or at least that was the idea. Here we go. There's supposed to be some words spoken over this, but my score somehow doesn't reflect that. Need to fix that. Thank you. So at this point, there's some tweaking in the score left to happen, and I've spoken with Andrea about performance. She has a score in hand, and it looks like this will be performed next year sometime. So I think that is all I have to say.
Yay, we have a date in the works. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that piece. We will move on now to Kelly. Unfortunately, Rachel couldn't be with us today, but she did send a little PDF document that I'm going to pop into the chat. So you guys, I actually also have a question that I put in there that we're not talking about until Q&A, but I will put that in there so you can open it up and see what Rachel had to say about her experience, but we'll go ahead and turn it over to Kelly.
Hi. So we had a really great time on this project, first of all. It was a lovely experience. Our first meeting, I don't even recall us looking at like prompts exactly. We just kind of talked about like we're both visual artists, and so and we both we have different styles, but we have a lot of common interests and common methods as well, not just visual arts, but we are both kind of like to explore different mediums, from printmaking to painting to digital art. So it was exciting to work with somebody who was so similar, but also like our styles are visually different as well. And so it was a fun challenge to work to get our two styles to work together. And so what we did was we eventually landed on in our first meeting. We just talked about our styles, what we like, what we're interested in, our interests inside art and outside of art, and we found we had a lot of common interests as well. And one of those common interests was kind of like mystical, magical type stuff, and one of those things being tarot cards. And we decided that we would take on the very small task of creating our own tarot deck. We did not complete it, but we did get farther than I expected us to get. And we do have plans to continue working on it and finishing it eventually. And let's see. I completed thumbnails for all of my cards. So we split the deck in half. So we each took 2 suits. So if you're unfamiliar with tarot, there's 4 suits, and then there's Major Arcana, which is kind of like its own suit on its own. And so we split, each of us took 2 suits to work on, and then we split the Major Arcana down the middle. So we each had, I think, 12 cards in the Major Arcana, and then each of the suits has 14 cards, I believe. And so again, like I said, super small task, should be easy. And so we wanted it to resemble the same symbolism as the Rider-Waite tarot deck, the traditional tarot deck. And so we were using that as inspiration, and we landed on the theme of we titled it our Kitchen Witch tarot deck. So it's all food and kitchen, home theme. So it was everything from actual food, images of food, plated food, uncooked foods, to also serving vessels, cooking utensils, cooking tools, appliances even, aprons. So anything that was kitchen related and could be used as symbols, we were like, yes, throw it in. And so we had a lot of fun just playing with what the symbolism could be, and also going from the traditional symbolism and meanings and inputting our own meanings into it, and also looking into other cultures' food traditions, right? And different tools or utensils or foods that might help with that symbolism. So what I have to show is just my Major Arcana. That's all I have to show. I do have, like I said, I have the thumbnails, and I sent those to you, Stephanie. I'm not planning on showing the thumbnails. They're just pencil sketches, but they're there, and they could go in the final exhibit, but I would really like to just show you the Major Arcana.
They are in the final exhibit, so if you don't want them there, let me know.
No, I do.
Okay.
I do. I
Okay.
I don't have them easily accessible on my computer to share, and so unless someone feels really strongly about it, I'll dig through. But I have the other ones up and ready to share. We used Google Classroom, so that was another thing, to create, just to have an easy way to share what we were doing and keep up on progress, because there were some weeks that we tried to meet every week, and it's hard to meet every week, especially as we kind of got more busy and life got to do what life does. When we couldn't meet, we could go to the Google Classroom, we could upload our work, we could pop our notes in there from our conversations and have a place, like a single place to refer back to. And that was new to me. Rachel's used that a lot, and it was her suggestion, and I loved it. And so it's a great home base to have everything, especially when you're both visual artists. You can just upload JPEGs, and it's so easy. And so these cards I'm going to share. I've got the Fool up right now. So I had the first 12 cards, and she had the last 12. So I will open it up with that. And so you'll see here, we talked a lot about texture. We both are big into textures. She, I think more so is very skilled at textures and adding in textures. It's a little bit more unfamiliar to me. I am definitely more focusing on the main subject, and a lot of my work tends to come out as stickers and stuff like that, because just single freestanding things. So the Fool, oops, I knew it was going to do this. Hold on just a second. It likes to zoom in on me when I don't tell it to zoom. So anyway, the Fool, we've got the little dog that's from the original Rider-Waite deck. But the Fool is, kind of full of promise and the beginning of a journey. And I don't want to take up a whole bunch of time explaining all of them, so I'm kind of just going to go and show you each of them, so you get the idea. But we have a texture in the background that doesn't really take too much attention, and then Rachel actually created all of the borders for all of them. And I love how that has a really great texture. And then they were drawn, and the backgrounds that I did were drawn on Procreate. So in the interest of time, we were like, let's do this mainly digital. We had a few analog aspects, but kept it mainly digital. The magician, the mixer, throwing on all the ingredients, and it makes something greater than its parts. High priestess, secret recipes. The priestess has, kind of the imagery of the pomegranates in the original card. The empress, abundance, fruit. Plus, it was really fun to create I really like retro stuff, so I of course had to throw in my retro designs. The emperor, the Hierophant, the lovers, the chariot. I really liked the wheeled cart for a chariot. Strength, the hermit. This one was maybe the saddest one for me to draw. It was just like the idea of eating alone, but also like the resourcefulness to be alone. I don't know. I really liked it. And the Wheel of Fortune. I found a picture of the weirdest, like 1970s spice rack. And it really does turn. And like a lot of them were like wall mounted. Like there was like multiple of this similar style, but it was just like, well, that's just too perfect. So, and then Justice, a set of scales, but I, didn't use the traditional scales. I used a kitchen scale. So that is my major arcana so far. We did get prices on getting it actually printed up, so that might happen someday. But right now we're still working on finishing it. But it was really fun to try and finagle kitchen stuff into like the symbolism. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. I love them. If you get them printed, you do, you know who to tell, because you had me sold at magician. I was like, yes, the stand mixer is the magician. You are correct. You are absolutely correct.
The first card, did it have an apron? The one with the little dog insignia?
Yes.
And
yes.
so what was the significance of the apron?
So in my thought process was, what's the first thing you do when you're getting ready to start a recipe? You put your apron on. It's a clean apron. It had nothing on it. And so the idea was it's the start of the journey. It's the start of the cooking process.
I see.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, this is perfect, John. Because this is the end of the talk. So have at it with Q&A, folks. Like, dive in. Daniel, I'm just going to repeat the question that I had for you, because I said we'd wait till Q&A and you already answered it. So I asked Daniel, I noticed in his score that he had given rhythm to some of the spoken parts, and I was wondering if that was just, for pacing reference, or if he intended for the pianist to speak them rigidly in the rhythm. And he did say that the rhythm is to be observed when given. He wants it to be rigid.
Well, some of it is meant to go with the music that's playing. So the rhythms it's going with the activity in the piano. So I swear it makes sense. And it's awesome. Shut up.
I have a question for you, Dr. Schwabe, and I just wanted to hear more about. You mentioned that there are some improvisatory elements in your electronic piece. I wanted to hear what kind of improvisatory elements do you mean? Like, was this an Ableton thing that you just like played some bass over? Like, what kind of elements were you thinking of?
I've actually played. I shouldn't say I really played. I mean, I did play things kind of in real time. I'm not very good keyboard player, but I did sort of do that. And then I layered different. There was one preset one sample in Logic that you would press one key and it would give you a triad with a suspension that would kind of resolve. And it was very unpredictable. So I would play it over a bass, a pedal pitch, you know, and it would just be like, whoa, you know, like, what is that? I was wondering, I mean, I've got it pulled up on YouTube. I just wonder what it would take for me to play for, you know, a minute or two, just to give you a sense of how hard would that be?
Or you just share your screen.
Okay.
And then as Daniel taught me, you have to click the Zoom audio thing.
Okay, let's see. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's the seagulls. Do you want to hear a second or two of seagulls?
Sure.
Okay. See if you get anything here.
So out of curiosity, John, I'm going to ask, did you already have Devin's videos when you started composing?
Yes.
So you were kind of composing, like, I don't know if this will be offensive, but don't take it offensively. But like doing like a soundtrack for a movie, like
that's what it ended up being.
Okay.
I was just kind of, you know, I would see what she was doing and I would just try to respond to it, you know. And that the seagulls music it's all written out. It's like Daniel's. I mean, everything is written out. But the first one, if you can give me a second, I'll just see if I can pull it up. And it's much different. And when I say improvisatory, it's kind of like all of this kind of jazz fusion stuff that I liked, like in the 70s. Well, still like it, but that's where it's coming from. I'll just give this a shot and see if I can. I'll have to. I'm so slow with all of this business.
If it doesn't derail you to for me to ask you while you're pulling that up, you mentioned that in the first one that your music is non-linear. What did you mean by that
It doesn't necessarily have any kind of synchronization or correlation frame by frame. I didn't try to sort of make my musical response. It's there. If they sort of line up, it's kind of happenstance, you know?
Non-diegetic?
Yeah.
What did you say?
Non-diegetic.
Yeah, that. Care to share with the class what that means?
Diegetic means that it's involved. Basically, you have the cues with it, and it will incorporate sounds like, oh, someone was clapping. So you had you can, how synced it is.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I don't think I'm going to find that other one.
Okay.
You might want to try if you clicked on her channel there. I bet it may be
Well,
there in the
here
video.
it is.
Oh, perfect.
There it is. Okay, I'll scoot around and see it. Okay, so it goes on. So that's the idea.
Very cool.
Love the bass. It's the right sound with the hippo.
I know Devin said the same thing.
The first
Yeah.
time it came in, I started to crack up. I was like, "Oh, that's great! That's the sound." Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
But it goes on. I mean, you gotta, it's 35 minutes of that. Yeah. And there are times when it sort of gets a little more energetic, but for the most part, I think there long periods of time when it's just sort of, just kind of layers of sound like that.
Like it. Well, okay, I'm gonna ask everybody a question. And it's actually two questions, and you guys are gonna love it. So I'm gonna ask you each, everybody who participated, and yes, the people who aren't here are getting it easy because they don't have to answer, but I might pin them down later and ask them. I just want to know, after this experience, especially after pushing boundaries, getting into something new, and this is largely coming from, last year, what I learned was I didn't know what I was doing, and I maybe didn't want to do it again. And it was not great. But that's okay. That's a valid thing to learn. So I'd like to hear from each of you. If you had something, like, what did you learn from it that you're going to take with you through your practice? Like, did you learn something that you're like, I don't ever want to do this again? For our composers, is it, I don't ever want to work with a living person's stuff again? This was horrible. Or did you learn something and you're like, this was amazing. Like, I didn't think this would be as, this opened up doors that I didn't expect. So I'm going to start with Kelly because she's been quiet down there.
I love going first. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You know what? This was actually overall a very positive experience. My only struggle with it was finding the time in life, and that's less to do with this and more to do with I've picked up subbing and doing more work in my day-to-day life, and it was like, oh gosh, I have to find the time to do this. If I could go back and change things, it would maybe be a regular meeting plan every 2 weeks instead of every week, because it ended up kind of being that at the end. time management, just in general. I learned a lot about that. Um, and organization, I learned a lot from Rach. She's much more organized than I am. She's the one who set up the Google Classroom. Um, and so not necessarily concrete plans of things that I'm going to change, but aspirations of changing my creative practice to incorporate a little bit more organization so that I can not necessarily to be more productive and crank out more stuff necessarily, but to make it easier on myself when I want to go back and reference something, or when I think, oh, I want to do this, it'll be easy for me to do it. So, in a de-stress kind of way and not a got to make more stuff kind of way. So
what I'm hearing is I should bring Rachel in to teach a Creative Nexus workshop on how to organize our stuff, because Kelly and I are both little chaos gremlins, as our friend says, where it's just
absolutely
hectic. So I love that, like, because you don't always think about how important organizational skills are in a creative practice until you can't find your stuff or remember what your thought was. Like, none of you can see my desk right now. That's by design. I can't see my desk either. So,
and it extends to the digital world as well. Like my desktop, my physical desktop is a mess, and my digital desktop is a mess. It's like, oh, where did I save that file? It's probably in the downloads folder because I never take anything and organize it. And then I have to sort through, and then I don't name them, so I can't even search them. Like that, this is my current process, and this is kind of what I'm taking from that is like a little bit of organization can go a long way.
Yes, I think that is such a valid takeaway. I love it.
Thank you.
Okay. Trey, you happen to be the next square on my screen, my Brady Bunch.
Perfect. Perfectly reasonable. I would say for me, it was also a very fun experience. When I look back on it, I've learned kind of a new process. Like I said, just not having written music with words above it ever. I've never really set any text in any medium before. It was definitely a step outside of my comfort zone, but it was a good one that it made me feel like I got more done. Um, Looking back on it, it doesn't feel like it now since I didn't really finish the project like I wanted to. But when I was working in that way in finale at the time, I was having these ideas that I felt like I was very motivated just by the text rather than my own, personal kind of intuition or what do I think of for the music, because I've never had this third party input to use with the music. And it was really fun, and it made me feel better about what I was writing, and I just had something to actually grasp on that was tangible, that I could try and relate as much of my material to as possible, and that was really helpful. It felt like it made a more cohesive project. I felt like, my overall kind of my setting, I guess, my world building is kind of my term for it. It felt like it was working out a lot better for me rather than my abstract ideas that I hope the audience could then latch on to with nothing, nothing to help them get them there, except for I just hope they do. This was a lot easier, I think, to listen to the words, think about what they mean, and then hopefully respond in a way that I would respond as well and think, oh, that music makes perfect sense for that passage there, which really made me feel like I was doing something right. And so then just turning that into more musical material was good for me. I know that in the past, when my writing, I have definitely slowed down at a lot of times and failed to kind of find the motivation to keep going. But in this instance, your poems were there, and there was always more words and more things to keep going with, and that was really really beneficial for me. I know that I took a big project that I'm going to now do for the theater department here or at the University of Northern Iowa, and I'm excited because it's going to be a lot of similar things. I think where they're going to have the cast, they'll have this script, and I don't have to respond to the script strictly, but it's really fun now that I know to do it. Like it's really cool to try and play like with it in that way. So I feel much more comfortable about that idea of just having some text on top of the music. And yeah, I mean that's what I would it was really, really great. I learned a lot from it and it was helpful.
Cool. I'm going to follow up on that and just ask, like, aside from the theater thing, do you think that this is something you would bring into like just your general composition practice, you know, whether it's words or just like ideas or because I know, you know, obviously I have Daniel to have I know that experience where, you know, like he does the sonification of different things and he pulls inspiration and everything. Do you think
Mhm.
you'll end up pulling more structure, more concrete ideas to use?
I mean, it really does help me. Uh, I'm still certainly figuring out kind of the best compositional practice or whatever that means for me. But it was a brand new thing that I think was really helpful. It was interesting how both Dr. Schwabe and Dr. Philly said that they don't often set text or work with live people, you know, who are there to talk about their artwork. In my head, I've only thought about setting text from people that I know or who would be there to read it. Like I haven't thought about stretching other kinds of material from people who are dead that's in the public domain or whatever that you can do whatever you want with. Um, I do think that I'll probably try and do it more in the future. When people talk to me about my music, you know, sometimes the dreaded question of like, have you ever done any vocal things come up? And I say no, and I don't really intend to. This isn't really vocal music, but this is a step towards the direction of there are vocals involved, which makes me feel like I'm doing my part in the vocal world as much as I can. So yes, I think I'll continue doing it. It was really a fun time.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. Um, Daniel, you're the next box.
It's lovely to be the next box. So I, like you said, I use text often to compose. Like I think about descriptors, and you know, kind of going off of some of what Trey's saying, like, you know, the idea of using the text as a vehicle for music. You know, that language is powerful, and I've used that as a tool in composition for quite a while now, and I think to good effect. At least I feel better about it, which means it's awesome. But I think my biggest takeaway is now everybody will be speaking in pieces, because you know I've done some vocal music, but honestly, my music is a little less common practice than most vocalists want to jump on, and I'm fine with that. I'm not going to change that. Uh, I take it to mean I haven't found the right vocalist that's really into my particular brand of crazy. So the search continues. But in the meantime, I think you know I've done the speaking pianist piece when Andrea mentioned this to me a few years ago. I was like, this is sounds like a neat idea. I like the idea of being able to, you know, have a narrative and then you know really just support the narrative through the sounds that I would have them make with their instruments. I think this is a powerful thing, and I think I will do more of it. And it's a way for me to really embrace working with text in a way that I have not done very much of, and is honestly more attractive than writing a song and you know engaging, having someone actually sing the text. That brings into all sorts of questions about the style of the singing that's going on. You know, there are some approaches to singing that I really just don't care to listen to. And hey, can artfully sidestep all of that. Just speak it. You know, so I actually, you know, maybe not for wind players, but you know, I'm working on a solo bass piece right now, and I'm like, he's gonna have to say something. Maybe I'll make him say something. I don't know. He just might end up having to recite some things, which I think is fine because I think he would be into it. But yeah, so I think that was my learning. I had with this piece, I had kind of I had the benefits of working with a text, but none of the baggage of it's a vocal piece. And I really like that. I mean, text setting, all that stuff was there, but none of the yuck.
It's okay. There are no vocalists on this.
And if there were, we can you know that's an opportunity for a conversation.
Okay. Well, cool. John, you are the final box, and I guess I will answer at the end because otherwise that would be unfair.
Well, I liked the challenge of this collaboration, and I think what I appreciated about it was sort of walking in blind and trying to see what you can do with what you know with the ideas that that evolve, and I think it's interesting. And for me, I mean, I have two pieces that I probably would not have written otherwise. So that's to the good there. So yeah, I like the experience for sure.
Well, I will say I also really like the walking in blind. The because this was I'm usually somebody who, while I'm trying to fall asleep, I suddenly have ideas. And I don't usually have a lack of ideas. It's usually a lack of time or a lack of being able to figure out how to do it. So it was really a very different process to go into it with, like, I don't have a plan. I don't have an idea. I don't have a starting point. I don't know. What do you want to do? And to be able to explore that together and create that, really exercise that creativity instead of just like, oh, inspiration struck, now I have this idea, but to really go and dig it out and find it and make it into something was really, really powerful to me. Because again, that's not how I normally work. I am a very intuitive person, and I just wait until the world talks to me. And
Mhm.
and it was great to see that, like, the world can go silent, hopefully not in a dead way, but the world can go silent, and I still have the facilities to create, to find that inspiration within myself, when I force a composer to sit down. And I'm married to one, so it's really easy, and say, what are we going to do? And that was really powerful. And I think for me, the other really cool part, um, as somebody who does not excel at being a beginner, um, at all, it was really rewarding to go through this process of, I have no idea what I'm doing. And by the way, when you Google how do you write slam poetry, there's no step by step. Like, there are no clear step by step instructables or anything telling you how to write slam poetry. So it was a really horrifyingly, intimidatingly rewarding experience to go from, like, these teenagers are doing this cool stuff, I can't figure it out, and then ultimately getting to the point where it's like, I'm starting to see what they're doing. I'm starting to be able to analyze it and see what the common threads are, and then do my bit to try to create them. So that's my takeaway. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question for Kelly. On your did you how do I say this? So your the theme for the whole deck is kitchen related. Do you have themes for your particular suits? Like, is your like, I noticed some of the images that Rachel put up. So you guys have the matching border. So you're approaching this as, texture, foreground, and then what you're doing. But like, what suits did you have, and like, did you? I don't know. What was the? How are you thinking to unify them, or how are you
Yes.
approaching that?
So I'm bringing the images up now. So for my two suits were pentacles. The original suits from the Rider-Waite deck started off as pentacles and swords, and we switched it to, from swords would be like cutting implements, knives, choppers, pizza cutters.
The mandolin.
Yes, exactly. Tea cleaver, even down to like cheese graters or microplane. Um, So that was kind of where I started with that one. And then pentacles, so those ones in the original deck they're round, right? So we landed on serving dishes. And so there's also associations with regular card suits and also elements. And so pentacles was associated with, I'm trying to remember, earth. And so food, serving dishes, things like that, things that were kind of grounded. So plates, bowls, food canisters, serving platters, I think even, so not so much cooking vessels, but serving and dishing vessels. And I would lay them out in a similar locations as the original deck. Again, to just kind of call back to them. And then the swords, I believe, were associated with the element of air. And so there was a lot of movement in the thumbnails, in the drawings of where I would place everything. A lot of, like, there was one, like, again with the pizza cutter, it was an image of it slicing through, so it is in motion, being held over a sink, in action and moving, rather than just sitting in one spot. There are some that they're sitting, but a lot of them are incorporating movement and stuff, because, again, calling back to those decks and the elements. And we didn't quite, since we didn't get the drawings for those cards done, in the corners we had made little symbols for each suit. And so each suit, the corners of the border were going to have the shape. We had a circle for the pentacles, kind of a teardrop shape for the swords. We had a rectangle for cups, because it was kind of like a mug shape, and I can't remember the last one, but so we kind of delved into more symbolism. It's not necessarily super obvious or super in your face about it, but it's like there's these little things there that kind of are there if you know it, I guess.
So cups is an obvious one. How did can you comment on Rachel's end of things with wands? What were the wands theme? She has the Ace of Wands as a match.
She does.
Which is cool.
Wands, I think if I'm remembering correctly, wands, the element is fire. So the match was, you can either start a campfire with it and cooking on it. You can start, so again, it's kind of similar to the journey, and there's a journey through the major arcana, and then there's a journey through each of the suits as well. And so the ace of whatever suit is always going to be kind of like the beginning point. So I think that her match was that. And so again, we kind of went back to the original Rider-Waite. What are the associations? And so the elements is kind of where we started and how we would get to where, like, the wands. And so the wands, I think the suit was fire. And so yeah, I think that's where that came from.
Awesome. Fun.
Thanks for asking.
I want to ask a follow-up too on that,
Yeah.
Because I noticed in hers that she commented on having, like, words, like, hidden in
Yes.
her thing. Did you do that too?
I didn't. No, that was something that we had talked about just at our last meeting, I think on Thursday. And so I didn't have much of a chance to incorporate it. I did a little bit on one of so I also didn't get any of my minor arcana done. I was planning on putting it in the minor arcana. I did put words and letters in some of mine, like the recipe book and stuff like that, and either tried I would just write it myself, or I would try and use like the same font that the suit or that the card name was in, to just kind of reflect that. But I didn't have any secret meanings because I didn't get my major arcana. I didn't do any major arcana. The the idea too is like our major arcana, we're going to be illustrated slightly differently with like more limited color palettes, more, straightforward line drawings. Whereas the minor arcana, we were going to do more illustrated, kind of have a background, have more of a scene. And then the major arcana was just straightforward. Here's your symbol. Done.
I can't wait to see them all.
Thank you. I can't either. We'll get there.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat. So since it is, going on 6, we'll go ahead and wrap it up then. So I will thank you all so very much for being with us today. It is wonderful to be able to hear about how it all came together and see how it came together. And thank you so much for people who joined us who were not participating, because it's a lot less awkward to not be talking to yourself during all of this. I'm really quickly going to drop the link in the chat to the virtual exhibit, where you can go and see everybody's work. If you go ahead and just click on it, it'll, open it up. And there are YouTube, like the YouTube is embedded, that's the word, so that you can see the videos of any time-based medium pieces, and then other still things are just there as well. And everybody has bios and little statements to give you a little context as well if you missed any of the overview. I will also invite everybody, we will be doing another residency in September, October. So we'd love for you to come back if it works for you time-wise. It would be wonderful. As you can see, very low key. I like everything zero stress. Life is stressful enough. And yes, definitely check out the exhibition. I will put all of, once this goes up on YouTube, I'll have everybody's contact information there. So if anyone wants to connect with our artists, you tell me what contact information you want. And that way they'll be able to contact you if they have any questions or want to connect with you or maybe work with you in the future. And I think that's everything. So thank you all so very much. This makes my day, makes my life. This is what I live for. I love it. So I love you all very much.
Thank you, Stephanie, for doing all of the organizing and facilitating, and it's great.
Well, you're welcome. Maybe next time I will not overbook myself during it and it will be better, but I'm always, I'm happy to do this. This makes me very happy. So
Great.
Well, I appreciate you. This was probably not a small undertaking, and so thank you.
That's right.
My pleasure. Well, have a wonderful evening, everybody, and we will see you around. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.